Hey, what's going on, everyone? Friday, July 10th. Uh, like normal, woke up really early. Woke up at 4 o'clock today. Me and my wife went out and did some walking. We walked for about 2 hours. I guess, yeah, sometimes we mix it up between running or just walking for a really long time. Usually on the weekends, we actually go walking for like at least 2 hours, sometimes 3 hours. That's what happened yesterday, too. So I didn't record an episode yesterday because we went out. We walked a little bit too long. We were out. Um, we drove like further away, so I got back just in time for uh, my normal work. Yeah, one of the reasons I like walking is, me and my wife, we talk a lot about random stuff, but also I spend a lot of time listening to books. So, because I can't run as much, so maybe I'll only run. Maybe I'll only be able to run for like 30 minutes. I can walk for like 3 hours or something like that. And I listen to books at like 2 times speed or 2.5 times speed, so I get a lot of listening. I don't always listen the whole time because sometimes I'll pause and just think about it. Um, but I did finish. So yesterday and today, I listened to a lot more of Icarus Deception. Uh, I finished it today. I even started re-listening to it today, but it's it's interesting because I also don't know how to talk about it. Like there's this. I think I mentioned this in one of my other videos. There's this broad concept of what it's about, but I can't exactly describe that. So I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try to talk about that today. Um, I can talk about very specific pieces of it. So like one of the pieces of it, he also talks about. So it's similar to Lynchpin. Like a couple of these books that he had, Lynchpin and Tribes and Icarus Deception, and maybe even Purple Cow to some extent, although that felt more like a business book. I think it was still that same idea of mm, art and going out on a limb and doing things differently. I don't even know if that's what the book is about. That's why it's so hard. When it comes to Gary Vaynerchuk, uh, his books are very business oriented. Like the social media revolution. It's unfortunate that I didn't. I was. I've been on Facebook since it started. Uh, I guess maybe I don't know exactly when it started, but when it was open for college kids, before it was open to the public, I was on Facebook, and I was on MySpace when I was in a band. But it's unfortunate, especially after reading these books, that I didn't capitalize on social media more. But when you read the Gary Vee books, like I said, he's very concrete in his ideas. He might not have an exact path for those ideas, and that's fine. But he's very concrete about what he's talking about, and it is business and marketing, and uh, the idea of that thank you economy. Give more than you push. So like give and help people make connections, even though uh, in the Icarus Deception he talks about the connection economy. And who else? Grant Cardone. Grant Cardone is all about selling and high energy and being obsessed. Those are probably like the three of his books. If you're not first, you're last. The 10x rule and be obsessed or be average. I like his energy, and they're still more concrete. His whole idea, like sometimes there's just so many ideas in the Grant Cardone books, so it's hard to come up with those. But things like Icarus Deception, it's hard to say what it's about. Broadly, it is about don't be afraid to aim too high. I guess that's why he wraps it up, or like he talks about that Icarus myth. Of course, don't be afraid to aim too high. Society or the world is constantly telling us to be worried about aiming too high when really, like, that's not the threat that we have to worry about. That's not the thing that we have to worry about. The thing that we should probably be worrying about is selling ourselves short. Be like aiming too low or just not aiming high enough. being comfortable with average. And one of the things he was talking about towards the end, he talks, or maybe that's actually at the beginning, because like I said, I started listening to it again. He talks about how the safety zone and the comfort zone. And, back in the 90s or whatever, getting that corner office job was safe and comfortable. I don't know. I wasn't working during that time, but he was saying it was safe because once you had that job, you probably had it for life. Like if you got high up in some company, the whole reason he talks about, I guess, it's not about being comfortable. When he talks about being comfortable, like in the comfort zone, it's like some people are afraid to give public speeches, or some people are afraid to basically put themselves out there doing the art, like what he talks about in Linchpin. But you didn't necessarily have to do that in the 80s or 90s. Again, I don't know if this is true. I'm going to take his word for it. I was born in the 80s. But I do know that people are afraid of public speaking. People are afraid of putting themselves out there. People are afraid even now of doing stuff on social media because it can get ridiculed, right? So it's scary to make videos. Like people are gonna laugh at you or whatever. It's scary can be scary to ask that girl out or that guy out, or like go in for an interview because there's that fear of rejection, stuff like that. And so, but what he's saying is you had your comfort zone. You didn't necessarily have to step out of line. Like you just had to follow the rules of your company and you'd get promoted. Eventually, you could work at a company for like 20 years and you'd get that corner office, and that was also safe because like you're going to be at that company forever. And one of the things he's saying now is that's not true. Like the safety zone has moved and your comfort zone hasn't moved with it. Like, so in order to be safe, if you think about the people who are quote unquote safe, it probably is people who are independently wealthy, or like people who write books, people who make blogs, people who are like let's say independently famous. If you're just, this is what Gary Vee talks about relating to personal brand. And maybe that's why he's talking about the importance of it, or just lots of people talk about the idea of personal brand. If I'm coder A, who's worked at these companies for 5, 10, 20 years, like maybe that's valuable. So then, like if they know the companies, if I work at obviously Facebook, if I'm working at Facebook, that's gonna be good on my resume, which I do always talk about. I think it's important to have it helps to have a good resume in absence of anything else. If you don't have a personal brand or a good reputation or a good resume, like you're just in trouble. So that's why you might take an unpaid internship, things like that. Oh, that's a good way to phrase that. Yeah, that's a good way to phrase that. Like kind of like shrink that idea. But if you, what was I saying? So like if I'm just coder A, programmer A, who has worked at Facebook and maybe Twitter or whatever, I'm sure it's not too hard to get a job. I have a buddy who's worked at, where did he work at? Google, Amazon, AMD, Apple, maybe just those 4. I bet whatever job he gets next is also going to be easy. But he will probably still just get a normal job. And that's not bad. But compare that with, like, obviously Bill Gates. Compare that with Steve Jobs. Compare that with Linus Torvalds. I don't know how to say his name even. Right? His name is obscure, but in the programming community, maybe you don't even know who I'm talking about. That's the guy who invented Linux, who started the Linux kernel, which you still might not know what I'm talking about. It's an open source operating system that competes in the market. It's not for sale. It's open source, so it's free. But it competes on the same level. Competes for users, let's say, for an operating system. It's not, like I said, it's not, you don't charge for it, so it's not like that. But the point is, this guy in the programming community, people know him. He doesn't need to look for a job. People are seeking him out. He probably gives, I don't know if he gives talks, I don't know, like that, but I'm sure somebody like that isn't worried about money because he has that personal brand. So people are seeking him out versus, like I said, even if you've worked at Google, Facebook, all these places, if nobody actually knows who you are, nobody's seeking you out. People might like your resume, and that's, that, again, in absence of anything else, it's better to have that, like, outstanding resume, but maybe it's even better to have that personal brand. But doing that stuff, putting yourself out there, is the scary thing. That's what makes you, like, that's what Seth Godin means by outside of your comfort zone, because not everybody is willing to risk the embarrassment or whatever of putting themselves out there that helps build, like, to do their quote unquote art, because it's not necessarily like just painting or music. Art in this case could be streamlining a business, building a process, doing YouTube videos, tweeting and making connections, things like that. So doing that stuff is outside of your comfort zone. But the problem is now those people like Linus Torvald, or obviously Steve Jobs did the same thing. Like, these people are the actual safe ones, except for Steve Jobs is dead. But that doesn't matter. People like him, people who are starting their own businesses, like people who are going out on a limb, doing something a little bit different. They're the safety ones. They're the safe ones. They're not just selling some cheap commodity, or they're not at the risk of getting fired or being part of a layoff, like during a pandemic or something, which I had friends that had to deal with that. Anyway, so that's one of the ideas. That's a more concrete idea in the book. And so broader idea is, be willing to step outside of your comfort zone. Recognize that the things that are uncomfortable are the things that are going to make you safe, like quote unquote safe. So do that art, reach higher. He also talks about the resistance. He talked about it in Linchpin as well. It's a concept from Stephen Pressfield's book, The War of Art. That book is, I think, in general, it's just about writing, but it is what all creative people, like, in order to become a professional, like, it's the thing that creative people deal with. And so, like, that's what that book is about. And so he talks about the resistance, which is that thing that blocks you, right? It's like that thing in your brain that blocks you, where you're on a diet and you're just like, whenever I'm on a diet, here's what happens to me. This is what's happening. I will come up with a lot of excuses about, it is like this thing happened, so we better celebrate. Or, a bunch of excuses to celebrate, basically. And so there's also a lot of things like when you want to start a podcast. We actually started Kojo, me and Cole. We actually started Kojo back in November. We didn't actually start the podcast at that point because when we could have, there was nothing actually stopping us. But we wanted to wait until Cole was in the middle of selling his house and he was buying a new one. So we were like, okay, well, maybe we'll just wait. We can just wait until the timing is right. And then like I said, we were filming some videos for like our tutorials on YouTube. And I don't know, I just stopped. It did get busy at work, but I don't think that it was so busy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm forgetting. But I don't think it was so busy at work that I couldn't have also done, like, kept up the momentum. I broke the momentum because it's uncomfortable. It's slightly uncomfortable because I'm not practiced at it to do tutorial videos or to talk on YouTube. That's exactly why I keep doing this channel, because I want to get better at talking. And I think I've almost done 2 weeks worth, and I feel like I'm getting like more comfortable with it. I'm just doing it. Obviously, I've been talking for 15 minutes now. Yeah, so there's something that will, when we're trying to do great stuff, there's some part of our brain that gets scared, and it stops us. It comes up with excuses why maybe now isn't the right time, or let me just organize whatever. Even before I was recording this episode or whatever you want to call it, even before I was doing this, for some reason I was organizing some movies, and or organizing some files and stuff and putting them up on Dropbox. I don't need to do that, but I was. I don't know why. That's kind of weird. So that's that. Again, that's broad, but that's the concept of the resistance. In Linchpin, he talked about resistance. In this book, he also talks about the resistance, but he says he doesn't like the title, The War of Art. And the reason is because Seth Godin doesn't think it's a war that you can win. It's not actually a war. He says what we should do, and I think I've mentioned this before, what we should do is when we feel that resistance, use that as like a guide. So when we feel that resistance, go towards that. That's the thing that we should be doing. That's kind of the beacon to go towards. And that he says that resistance isn't something that you can necessarily win against. That's why it's not a war. He says, I don't know if this is true or not, but he says he feels it all the time. Like whenever he's trying to write a new book or do something like that. I can believe that, at least to a certain extent. Obviously, people who are more famous or further along than me are going to know, like they're going to have their own experiences. I can see that. Certain things, that does make sense. If you're pushing yourself, if you're stretching yourself outside of your comfort zone, as it becomes easier to record record on YouTube and record tutorials, and especially as I, get more Twitter followers or I get more interactions with people on YouTube, it's probably going to become easier. It becomes more fun because it's comfortable. Obviously, some people are still going to dislike it or not. I mean, right now, nobody knows who I am. At some point, it's going to be, people are going to know who I am and, rip on the tutorials. That's fine. I'll just learn how to do those things better. But at some point, if you get big enough and you're not pushing yourself, you're just doing the same thing, then you're back. You've just expanded your comfort zone, which is a good thing. But if the goal is to keep pushing outside of your comfort zone, then yeah, I can imagine that resistance is always there. So he says, go towards that resistance. Like, that's the stuff that you should be doing. So I really do like that concept. In Linchpin, he talked about how you got to be careful with that. Sometimes, it's not the resistance, or it's not your lizard brain that's telling you to, like when you're angry at your boss and you want to send some angry email or whatever, and you're not sure if you should, you probably shouldn't. that's first of all. Maybe that's he kind of talks about the difference between your conscience and the lizard brain, and so yeah, like it's a tough balance, and like I said, it's hard for me to talk about because these concepts are big and more vague. That's why I like talking about it, because by talking about it, I hope I can solidify it in my head. I'm trying to think of what else. What else did he say? I wrote down a couple of notes here. He also says, you're probably the world's worst boss. Like, if you think about it, you are a company of one. You're selling your services to, if you only work for one company, you're selling your services as a consultant or whatever for that one company. So you are your own boss. But you're probably too hard on yourself. You rip on yourself all the time. You don't properly train your employee. You don't give good feedback, things like that. Maybe, what else? You let yourself play too many video games and eat too many cakes. So like I also don't think I'm explaining this concept right, but like, don't train yourself while you're in charge. Oh yeah, you don't train yourself. You're in charge of your, you're in charge of your education. You're in charge of your career. Yeah. Again, I like that concept. It's difficult to talk about, I guess, just because it's broad. I don't have like strong ideas on that, but I like that concept of, yeah, you are your boss, you are your teacher, so teach yourself better, right? I think there's a book. Jordan Peterson wrote a book, 12 Rules for Life. And he says, treat yourself like somebody you would care about or something. Now I'm gonna mess that up. But he talks about how, like, people who get medicine from their doctor don't always take their medicine. Like they'll stop or whatever, they forget, they get lazy. But whenever they get medicine from their veterinarian to give it to their dog or cat, they diligently give it to them every day. It's because they care. They care deeply about their cat. They want their cat or their dog to get better. And so he says, why don't people do that for themselves? And that's the point of that chapter, is do that. Do that for yourself. Treat yourself like you are somebody that you care about. And I think that's true for work, like as you are your own boss, and that's true for education, like you are your own teacher. Treat yourself, you are the teacher. Now treat yourself like you are a student that you care about. You want to see your career go forward. You want to see that side project take off, things like that, right? So that doesn't mean never rest. It doesn't mean don't play video games. That's up to you. But also, if you are giving advice to a student and the student's only studied 30 minutes today, and then they want to go and watch TV and play video games for 3 hours, like what advice would you give to that student? If that student had a project that really wanted to take off, or a company they really wanted to work for, what advice would you give them? Right? So that's where those ideas come from. And I do agree with that. Imagine you could do the same thing. Imagine what kind of life would you want for your kids? So the advice what advice would you give to your kids about studying or smoking or whatever? Again, it doesn't mean don't have any fun, because I think the advice I would give to my kids is also have some fun. Recognize that you do probably have to work hard, especially in the beginning, because you want to set yourself up for more success. Whatever that means. Success can mean different things to different people, and that's fine. You want to set yourself up. And so, yeah, you can take some time to relax, but playing video games 2 hours a day or 4 hours a day or 6 hours a day or whatever might not be setting yourself up for success, unless you're going to be in esports or something like that. So it's just overall, I'd recommend the book. I guess that's why I'm talking about it. Maybe that was unnecessary to say. Of course I recommend the book. I've listened to it multiple times. I'm going to listen to it again. Let's see, what else? I don't know if this is interesting. I've been trying to interact more with people on Twitter. And so I was interacting with somebody, a new student. I guess this goes kind of towards what I talked about a couple of days ago when I was showing that code, how when I see on Code Signals a solution that is 50 times slower. This is certainly the difficult part about programming. So what somebody was asking on Twitter, there was a couple of statements, like if you do I++ to increment, or you do I plus equals 1 to increment, or you do I equals I plus 1. And he was asking why they have slightly different timings, to perform the operation. And one was like maybe double it was double the speed, or like twice as slow, or however you want to put it. And so I explained it to him, at least based on what I understand. I was trying to explain it to him what the assembly code might actually be doing in this case. And I was saying, like, it's cool to know, but also you don't necessarily have to focus on this stuff. But maybe, like I said, I'm trying to connect it back to that last video. That's the hard part, is maybe you do have to focus on this stuff. There's certain things, I mean, like by default, I always just like, I do plus plus I in that case, right? If I'm just incrementing for a single statement, like in a for loop, I'll do plus plus I. And the reason is because I know behind the scenes that the other ones are making a copy. Like I plus plus, for example, makes a copy and then returns the old value. But plus plus I doesn't make a copy. It just increments this variable, and so you can actually just increment it effectively by doing like a plus equals operator. And I also know in assembly, like the way that the add instructions work, everything in the CPU works on registers that are within the CPU. And so when you add something, when you add two operators, when you add two operands, you're adding basically one register to another register. So the default move, or the default action, is to modify one of those registers. So if you do like add EAX comma BAX, EAX comma EBX. If you add one register to another, you're going to modify that first variable, effectively doing a plus equals. And so I know that. I don't sit and think about it all the time, but now my habit is just doing plus plus I. And it seems like a lot of people don't know about that. That's another thing. I don't know why people aren't taught that about plus plus I versus I plus plus. I'm not sure. It seems like nobody knows about that. So that seems weird. But yeah, like there's certain, you can call them optimizations that you can do that don't really matter much in the long run. The algorithmic optimizations are much more important, actually. But I still do those micro optimizations just out of habit. I don't sit and think about it all the time. I'm not stressing it. But also I think, oh, there's no reason, like, why would I make a copy of this? Why would I do I plus plus when I can do plus plus I? Maybe the compiler is smart enough to optimize those away, which compiler is going to be smarter than me, so it very well could be. But maybe not, So it honestly, it probably is. So that's also why the micro optimizations aren't really worth it. You're not really getting much of a win. The thing that you're winning on is going to be algorithmic optimizations. Like if you can take an n squared algorithm down to like n log n or log n, then like you're really winning. If you don't know about anything that I'm saying, like, sorry. I am still a programmer. We're still going to be talking about code. Yeah, soft skills and code, I guess. That's basically what I'm going to be talking about. Yeah, so I guess that's it for now. I have to record some more tutorials. I'm still working on the layouts tutorial. Hopefully I can finish up recording. I mean, I'll definitely finish it this weekend. And then I think we're working on a to-do app next. So if you're following any of the Kojo tutorials, well, hopefully you like those ones. Anyway, I'll talk with you later.